I spoke to Fatima Mir, and she told me that Ahmed Deedat's father was a close friend of her father and a regular visitor to their home. And when Ismail Mir, when they were just newly married and Ismail Mir went to prison for the first time, for those of you who don't know Ismail Mir, he's one of the colleagues of our president, ex-president Mandela, very close colleague, one of the original authors and founders of the charter. He wrote it in his own handwriting, he tells me. So when he went to prison for the first time, Ahmed Deedat's father went to console her and to give her support and told her that if we convert these people, then all the problems will be solved. My point in this is that Ahmed Deedat grew up in an atmosphere where the words of Quran, of the Prophet and of Dawah was there. It existed and it was discussed. So Ahmed Deedat grew up in a home where these ideas were discussed at home. Among the people that affected his life were people that most of us don't know. One of the first was Maulana Abdul Alim Siddiqui, the father-in-law of the late Fazlur Rahman Ansari, Ishtiaq Hussain Qureshi, and a strange person who came to our shores by the name of Joseph Perdu. He was a Baha'i, and he used to give classes on Sunday at the Pine Street Madrasa. A lot of the Muslims who were searching used to attend those classes on the Quran. There was such a lack of information, of understanding of the Quran. It was not there. You got to understand that at the time of Ahmed Deedat's youth, these things were not there. So they had to find people like Joseph Perdu, who was a Baha'i, to tell them something about the Quran, and who was one of the first teachers of the Quran for them. So my point in this is that how little there was at that time of Ahmed Deedat when he was growing up, that they had to find inspiration and knowledge from somebody who was from a borrowed faith. And when you see his passion for the Quran subsequently, you find that he was able to translate that early years of learning and to say that for the Muslims of the world, they need to have the Quran and they need to understand the Quran. And I think that more than any other person in this century, he has been passionately promoting and distributing the English translation of the Quran. So part of his legacy is that yes, he was concerned about the Christian debates that he had. I'm not reflecting on that too much because you know about it already, but we'll come to it in a minute. But that he was passionate about the Quran, and he did so much to present the Quran to the world, especially the English translation of the Quran. On reflection and looking at the glimpses in his life, when we were growing up, it was a real problem dealing with the Afrikaner. It was not difficult for him to take you off the road, or to get hold of you in some corner and slap you, or to insult you, or to call you coolie or whatever, all those terms. It was very normal for him to do that, to abuse you, to humiliate you. That was the atmosphere in which we grew up. The abuse of the Afrikaner against people and white people generally. And here we find Ahmed Deedat at a time when people are afraid to even talk to these people, standing up on the major platforms, confronting them, not afraid to stand up to them. And believe me, it was an exhilarating experience for all of us that used to attend his lectures, to stand up and to see the white man being defeated in an atmosphere of apartheid, in a time when he was king and you were nothing, Ahmed Deedat stood up like a colossus and he fought for Islam, he presented Islam, he humiliated them, and we all clapped and said Allahu Akbar. These were times when it will be difficult for you to understand what it meant to young people living in apartheid to have somebody like Ahmed Deedat stand up to these people.
Brother Matthews, come man, the platform is yours.
And in standing up to them, he had to test his skill with the best of them. And as you know, they all go through Bible colleges, they all go through institutions of higher learning. They are truly educated people. And one of the things that I had in my notes to tell you is that he was a self-taught man, and you all know that. He didn't have a formal education. He was a self-taught man, but he stood up and challenged those who were professors of theology, bishops, and all kinds of people, highly educated people. And he was able to meet them intellectually and meet them in a way that made them think and reflect about their own faith. One of his greatest legacies is that the Christian world will never be the same again. Every Bible college, every theological seminary in the world has a section devoted to Ahmed Deedat. It has become compulsory reading and compulsory viewing. To graduate from those colleges, you have to study Ahmed Deedat. And the debate that he started off with, and this is his true legacy, they started off calling your religion false, your Quran false, your Prophet false. They don't do that anymore. You won't see a Christian these days calling your religion false or your Quran false. And that is a remarkable achievement, because you've got to understand that they came knocking on our doors. It was in our history textbooks. It was on the radio and in newspapers and in magazines that about your religion being false, your Quran being false. But today you don't hear it anymore. Now they have adopted a different approach. Now they are beginning to understand that there is something else in Islam which is beyond their claims of its being false. So they begin to research and find things that they can deal with and the things that they can challenge you with. But it's a whole new ball game. What is important is that the Christian world is beginning to think, and every honest scholar in Christian theology is beginning to say that the questions that Ahmed Deedat has raised are questions that need to be answered. And to answer them means that they are in trouble. Because the answers to those questions will lead them to Islam. And that is the great legacy of Ahmed Deedat, that while they may not admit it, they certainly have to deal with it. He has not been the person to bring people closer to Islam in the approach that he adopted. He was meeting an aggression with an aggression. There was an aggression on Muslims. He met the aggression in his way with aggression. You fight me, I fight you back. And that is why people didn't like him. And Muslims said it was disturbing the peace that may exist between, but it was a false peace. But in that way, he was able to deal with the Christian world and to make them to start thinking. When we nominated him for the King Faisal Prize, the people that received the nomination asked us a few questions. For example, he is not the leader of a great Islamic movement. He has not converted thousands of people. We don't know him as a great scholar, as an author. What is the purpose? What is the impact? We know that he is popular, but why should he be awarded the King Faisal Prize? And the answer is there in his citation, that he confronted and defeated the worldwide Christian missionary aggression against Islam. On the one hand,